All right, good evening. Welcome to the Capital Improvement and Planning Committee meeting. It is Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. It is 7:02 p.m. All members are present. First order of business is approval of outstanding meeting minutes. I think we do not have those yet from last week, so we'll have those for next time. I didn't miss them, right? Okay. Next item is review, deliberation, and possible votes on FY26 capital requests and longer term planning. So before we go into any sort of detailed analysis and deliberation, I wanted to level set at least on where we want to take this conversation and make sure we have agreement on that, because I think that will frame the level of discussion we have on certain items versus others. So as normal, the select board is trying to get their arms around the budget in a broader perspective. That will be discussed after us, I think, based on the ordering of the agenda on Tuesday night with the select board. My intention is, unlike prior years, I don't think we are going to walk in with a here is the capital list. I think we need to walk in with a potentially a list of bucketed items of these are kind of the ones you have to do. And here's what Brian has put in his budget. These are the ones that require discussion. And they require discussion because we have concerns about them. We don't think the timing is right. And or I think it's really hard to make decisions on some of these, given some of the numbers, just based on lack of knowledge of the broader economic picture of the town, right? In how much is going on within the operating budget, because obviously the operating budget is growing at a certain rate, then it naturally has a cascading effect on how we fund capital. But if you recall some of our prior slides, we have always tried to at least push the benchmark up of the amount of money the town is spending on capital, whether through appropriation or through debt, compared to prior periods. And I believe that was then validated, Brian, by the state DOR when they looked at us, saying that our percentage for our overall operating budget as compared to the amount of it that is made up of debt or appropriations related to capital is on the low side, not on the high side, which makes you question kind of our parts of our capital strategy. So that's how I was planning to approach it. I mean, some things I think will be easy to discuss. Some things I think need some more information, and some may need the select board and advisory to weigh in on where they think they're at. And there's obviously some bigger projects in play as we move forward. Is everyone kind of at the same page as me, or think we should be approaching this differently?
I think there's a lot more higher ticket items for this year, so I think I'm with you on that approach.
Tony and Joe?
I don't have
All right.
your idea.
Okay. So let's do this. I will start screen sharing and I may turn it to Brian at some point, but what I thought I would do is try to ground us in where we actually are, in terms of we've now heard from every department and trying to figure out what we're going to bring forward. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. So I think we should start with the big ticket items, and then we can come back up to the top. So Brian was kind enough to prepare this summary of the larger items and proposed those that would be bonded. And then all the items up above would be appropriation. So coming directly either through and I think, Brian, there'll probably be some discussion about alternative funds such as ambulance, et cetera, for a few of these things. So let's group the John and Mitchell Street sinkhole and the Willow Street culvert and sinkhole together. You have $900,000 project for design related to John and Mitchell, and then you've got an over $3 million item for Willow Street. Where is the committee at on those after hearing from Bill. Anyone?
So, well, I'll take a shot at this, Jason.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time. I mean, we listened to everyone talk, right?
Mhm.
And you know, there was some, but I don't know. They didn't shoot for the sky. It didn't feel like all of the committees that we heard from.
Mhm.
And so now there's a number, $4.349 million here.
Well, that's for appropriation.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And
Yes.
so what was the number last year? I
So
guess
you
I'm
had,
wondering just like big picture, how do we put this in context?
um,
Because can and in the context of what's coming down the road, these individual items, oh sure, they sound fine, but how do you put
mhm.
it in context?
So I'll start, and Brian, you may have, a broader picture that you have from a rev cap perspective. Um, ARPA has greatly muddied the capital waters over the last couple of years. We've spent a significant amount of money on capital. Most of it, not all of it, has been funded actually through ARPA. So it actually never hit the operating budget. I would say on average, we've been spending $1 million or less on capital appropriations since capital's been around, which is, in and around 2020. So when you look at a $4 million number, Tony, at least the appropriation side of this is 4 times our normal run rate.
Okay. And so does that mean we're supposed to try to prioritize this down to $1 million?
Well, I mean, I think my view is million was always light, given what we need to do as a town in terms of we really haven't put any money into a building other than public safety in 25, 30 years. At least from an operating budget perspective, we did put some CPA funds obviously into the townhouse in the library. But a lot of this stuff is vehicles and other miscellaneous projects. I think what I would recommend we do is I think you can parse this out. There are certain things like police cruisers and road maintenance, building maintenance fund that are built into like our normal baseline. We see them every year. They fluctuate slightly. So unless factors have changed that we think we don't need to continue with that, those would I put in the need to keep going with. We then have other items, primarily in DPW, that somehow they got massively behind, right? And I realize you had a department head change somewhere in there as well. But the amount of requests on the appropriation side are significant compared to what we had seen as in our prior year run rates. And as you all recall, last year we probably spent the most time deliberating over DPW and working with Bill to have him prioritize, which he has prioritized for us. So to me, I find it hard to believe we would go in with a continued baseline of $1 million when we were really spending more than that over the last couple of years. It just wasn't all hitting the tax rate. But I also struggle that there's absolutely no way you can go in with 4 million and kind of quadruple in 1 year the spend on capital unless this is, considered a blip in a one-time sort of thing. And some of the bigger ticket items that you're rightfully correct in proposing that we discuss, I think that will fall out through kind of bonding, right? And how the town decides to bond for that over time. And versus some of the appropriation items are really one-time items that don't repeat themselves other than some of the items I already mentioned to start off. Does that help or muddy the waters? And I don't
No,
know,
that
Brian,
helps, but I mean, it's I guess at least in my thinking, then because we can justify or not justify many things here. So what number, at least the way I think about it, is what number do you want to use as a target for 26 for these items? Is it $2 million then? And try to make it fit in $2 million? Or what do you think, Jason? Two and a half? One,
Well,
1.25? Like, what's the number?
that's why we have a treasurer here. I don't know, Brian, if you have a view, like when you take a step back and look at this bigger picture, right? Because we're one key to the puzzle, right? Then you've got a town operating budget and a school operating budget that then come together and kind of hit a head. Like, should we be benchmarking? And I think I would approach this as, is there a number that we shouldn't be exceeding under any circumstance unless it's an emergency?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a difficult question because we're at we're in December, which is very early. I think, at least my opinion for tonight, is that we're not gonna solve everything. This is a continued discussion that's gonna have to happen. But yeah, I mean, 4.3 million is probably not a doable number. I'm thinking more like 2.5 at tops.
That include the impact of new debt or just the appropriation?
Just the appropriations, yeah. Yeah, the new debt is very interesting. We got some projects on there that are very up in the air. So I think we're gonna have to walk those along. We're not gonna have answers in December. We're just not. So I think the way to approach it is to know we're gonna have to call some of this out. And again, maybe 1.5 million, or somewhere thereabouts, 2 million. Right now, and this, again, I want to caution this by we're early, but the overall budget right now is about 11% tax increase. It's not unusual to start with that because let's face it, this is what departments want. And they put in their best, I don't want to say wish list, but they put in, what they really want as substantial requests for FY26. So, I mean, we've got to winnow that down somehow, and it's really, really important that we kind of, target these things that we really need. And the things that we really need, I've always been, don't back off of it. I mean, if we really need it, we really need it. Stand by it, but we've got to somehow winnow out the things that maybe we can push off or find other solutions to, or things like that. So it's a little bit of it's not like an easy thing to do right away, but there's no question we're gonna have to winnow this down to some reasonable number of 1 million to 1.5 million to 2 million less than what it is right now. Clearly, but it's not gonna happen tonight. So I don't wanna like put pressure on the committee to be like, this is gonna be like solved in one night. Right now, for the overall budget for Tuesday night, which I'm gonna just quickly go over, I have everything in because we always put the worst case scenarios in. So, and I won't get into the details, but we have a lot of departments, yeah, especially public safety, asking for some additional staffing, needs for FY26. That's costing a lot of money, and that's not helping things. So, so that's where we stand. I think Jason explained it best. We somehow gotta figure out what the tiers are of where we want to be for FY26 and try to figure out how we can get there. I think some of these things maybe can be pushed off, but it's gonna be a process.
So given that, then, Jason, what do you want to try to accomplish tonight?
Joe, I will answer that. Joe, you had your hand up. Did Brian resolve or somewhere through that discussion, or do you have something to add before I go and answer Tony's question?
No, as I'm looking at this, I'm sort of conflicted by the nature of discussion as to whether we're talking about strictly operating budget or whether we're talking about bonding. you know, what is there going to be I mean, when you and I originally started on this committee, you know, there were certain things that were pretty much automatically determined that they were going to be paid year over year. And that we
Mhm.
weren't going to bond things, we weren't going to necessarily put things in leases, those sorts of things. I'm not saying that's wrong or right. All I'm saying is that with the increasing amounts of money that we're going to need to do these sorts of things, you know, the question is whether at some point we are going to have to change those policies or change those ideas of what those policies were. I don't know what that limit is. I think that's what is really being talked about here tonight. But when I'm looking at the culvert projects and increased road costs and those sorts of things just alone, let alone the equipment needs at the DPW, you know, the question becomes whether this committee, we don't necessarily orientate or make policy, but whether we want to discuss whether we should think about, whether we are thinking about a change in the way that we're going to do business. That's all I was thinking.
That's a good point. So I would approach it in 3 ways, to answer Tony's question. Item 1 is there anything that the committee has heard that they're just absolutely not supportive of, even if we had no other capital expenses? So let's start there. Either on the bonded or unbonded schedule. So I'll start with the unbonded, so the appropriation schedule, which you should see on the screen. Is there anything in this list that you look at based on what the department had presented, you just can't support for some reason? And I'll start with one. It's not that I don't support it. It goes to Joe's comment on policy, Brian. If the fire department in the budget they submitted, I assume, has a deputy chief, which is a new position. I see you shaking your head, yes.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So on that particular one, the cost of adding a deputy chief, right, is really whatever the salary is, whatever the benefits is, plus a capital asset, right? Like that's the cost of adding the position that the town is going to need to weigh in on.
Yeah,
To
you're
me-
talking over $200,000. Yep.
Yeah. So to me, and this again is something we can't necessarily set, but it's a recommendation we can make. That's an item that should stand alone as its own article at town meeting. Right, outside of, right, like fire department can, right, but again, we don't do the budget, but this is tied to a position. It's not tied to a need, right? So the town has to decide first whether that position is something they want to invest in. It's just like, I'm sure if we added additional police officers, there's going to be 3 police cruisers as opposed to 2 police cruisers as we move forward, sort of thing. So that was just a policy thing because they're tied together. If I have my notes correct, the fire chief was very clear when he was here that obviously that article doesn't, that car does not go through to town meeting if he doesn't get the position because there's no need for the car. So that would just be one item that I would suggest we potentially think about how we categorize it, because it's not like a recurring item. It's directly tied to a new initiative that the fire department has, potentially at the direction of the select board. The other item, so that's the only item to me that stood out as not necessarily one I don't support, but one that certainly could be thought about a little differently. And then the other item that it's not specific to an item, but just in general, we cannot possibly go forward with all this DPW. And I think we're going to have to work with Bill, like much like we did last year, to really prioritize some of these things, and also understand the impact to service if we don't support something, so that the residents are eyes wide open of what impact that would have. Is it going to take longer for the streets to be plowed? Is it going to take longer for them to be sanded? Is it just a emergency vehicle, or is it a day-to-day vehicle that just may see a longer useful life? Those are the 2 categories I saw on the unbonded or appropriation items. Steve, I see your hand up.
So I just opened up the DPW preferences. So on that, not even cracking the top 10 would be the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Um, it was I think five for the town. Um, that would probably be where I would start. And then the roadway maintenance and sidewalks, that's separate from the design that we had approved for for the design of those sidewalks, correct?
That's
Last year?
ongoing of, well, yeah, this is an item we've had for years. So
Okay.
it's basically your street needs to be paved, right? They go down a list of highest priority to lowest priority. This is how
Mhm.
they go and pave a street when they need to pave a street or bundle multiple years of funding together to go and do it.
Okay. And the DPW, and I don't think the water got prioritized there, but um just looking at this, you know, the flashing beacons I think is probably my top one that we could probably push off.
And that was tied to a grant, if I remember, though. There might have been a performance period. Do I have that right, Brian?
Yeah, I think so. You're right.
Okay. Um, all right. Any other items that just sorely stick out as like we need to move on from, absent, the total cost that we're looking at least on the appropriated side? I'm gonna ask the same question eventually on the bonded side. The next item I will ask, and it sort of leads into where we already have started to go with this conversation, is are there any items or departments on here that we want to prioritize, like have them prioritize if this, then that, other than DPW, which has already essentially done that for us?
I would put anything, the thin classroom floor replacement. Um, uh, it's not that I want to put that off, but you know, if we're talking a couple years down the line at doing something different, then that could be roped into the cost of a rehab or whatever else is decided about Finn. Um, I understand the reason for doing it sooner than later. But if we're going to either convert it into a community center or mothball it or knock it down because we're making it irrelevant with a new school, that would be certainly one cost um, that I'm not sure that we should be doing.
I haven't heard any consideration where it would be mothballed. Uh,
Well, this is when we talk about that school project and we talk about the eventualities. Well, the new school project comes in, the future of Finn will then have to be determined. And
yeah, I agree with that.
I understand there are plenty of people that have their opinions as to what's going to happen with it. But in a full discussion, mothball, community center, using it as a commercial building for the town to rent out to other businesses, those will all come full circle. So redoing the floor for this particular reason could be questionable.
And I guess leaving the future off to the side, we are going to have students in that building for another 5 years. And my understanding was it was due to water. So it's just like when we had to put the AC in last year, it's just to make it safe for people to still be in the building. I can clarify, but that's what I thought I heard.
Oh no, I heard the same thing, but if we're putting money into a building that we're gonna do something different with anyway.
No, it's a valid point. I just want to make sure it's safe. Go ahead, Steve.
And then just looking at the window units at Trottier, I mean, are we talking like a Home Depot window unit, that's $150? Because at 130,000, there'd be 800 windows that we're putting it in. I just think that budget seems high for that. Just kind of doing just quick math, but I don't think we, got to the nitty gritty of asking how many it is and, the price per, assuming that includes installing all of them. Seems high.
We can sort of push on that point, but yes, they're not. I mean, there is some probably, fitting them into whatever windows there are, but we can get the underlying detail of how they came up with that. Good, Joe.
Are we also determining that all the ones for appropriated underwater will then be bonded and paid for by the water fund?
Well, that's a good question. I'll broaden it, Brian. Is when Bill was here, right? A lot of these water projects kind of came out of nowhere. Have you now done a water rate analysis? Because it's separate than the tax rate, right? And most of us have town water, so we'll bear the burden of it too. But like, what does this do to the water rates?
Yeah,
If all
right,
of this
we're
is-
actually undergoing that water rate study right now. In the next, month or so. So it's actually changed to, we never used to do water rate studies, to be honest, which is kind of incredible, but we're doing them annual now, but actually it depended on Bill getting me some information and his budget, which is still pending. So it's delaying it a little bit this year, but we're probably in the next month or two, we're gonna have that study done. And the consultant will, put all this in a little mixer and come out with some rates to recommend to adopt in the spring or late winter to accommodate these projects.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, because when it talks about the main replacements and things, I don't know if that's water or wastewater. Because obviously, if it's a wastewater, that would really be a town responsibility versus, the sort of water system that people use in their houses. That might also be a combination town versus water fund type of expenditure. So I'd be a little bit concerned about that. But that's about 900,000 right there in the water. So it's not that I'm against keeping everything up to date so that we don't incur, failures. But that is kind of a hefty, especially at the bottom end, is a hefty. And we're talking about Loop at Fisher presidential design. Are we looking to pay for that project? Because if we're not, then we probably shouldn't pay for the design.
So just
Yeah.
as an aside, the water, some of the projects in the future years at least, we're looking to the MWRA for some no interest loans that are available through them for water projects. Obviously, it depends on what the project is. And there's a cap of like, so many millions of dollars that Southborough has, but they do offer no interest bond loans, which is quite attractive. So me and Bill are talking about that now. It doesn't affect FY26 so much, but it will affect some of the outer years and some of the projects he has for slated for FY27 and later.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you, Brian. And certainly bond rates very much affect if we're gonna, future dollars are always worth less than present dollars. So, pushing out some costs into the financing world, if we can get it at a zero or, what we used to get, which we, sorely miss at that sort of 2-3% level. That would definitely be an advantage for us. Thank you.
So my suggestion on water, to hit the easy part, I think we hold off on any recommendations around water until we see the impact to the water rates, because the water rates are going to double if you do all these. Then it's going to become a discussion of what's critical to keep the water running in each of the neighborhoods versus a nice to have, such as maybe some of these trucks and other items that, you know, I'll call it accessory to vehicles. There anything else at this point on the appropriations? All right. We are not going to talk about Neary tonight. But that is on here, given it would be approved in the same fiscal year. So that will be a whole separate discussion of what that number is. This is the latest number that we have in terms of town share. But what I do want to talk about is these sinkhole projects, Choate Field in the Trotter roof, to see where people are at on these. These are obviously the long-term bonds, Brian. They all, I guess, Choate and Trotter roof have always been on our capital plan. And have been for many years. The culverts are clearly something brand new that we are dealing with at an exponential rate. My personal view on the culverts and sinkholes is we need to make the select board and advisory aware of these if they're not already aware. But almost $4 million just for two very, very small streets, albeit very important streets that in some cases connect major arteries. This screams for assistance well beyond the Southborough taxpayer. Just my 2 cents. And we are not in a position to do any of that, but we can certainly educate. Then I think it becomes a discussion of if you're not successful in those efforts, what do you do? And this goes back to all the fun some of us had on the Northborough Road culvert, which was pennies to the dollar compared to what we're looking at here.
Yeah, I mean, Jason, tell me if I'm wrong. You're looking at $1,000 per household, essentially, a little bit over 3,800 households or so.
Over time.
If you bond them, but in present dollars.
Brian, do you agree with that math?
Yeah, I would say over time. Yeah, I don't think it wouldn't be that much per year.
Mm.
Yeah.
No, that's not what I'm alluding
Yeah.
to. I'm just alluding to the financial burden per household.
And Brian, what would you well, how long would you bond these for?
That's a great question. A sinkhole is very interesting. I mean, I th- I'd probably try to stretch it out. I'd have to talk to Bill more about like how that, like, obviously we try to match amortization schedules with useful life and everything. I'm assuming that if we fix this, it would last 15 to 20 years. So I would say somewhere in that time frame.
Right, Joe.
And I know Bill doesn't have a crystal ball and we don't know, but I'm gathering that more of these are coming down. If these two are showing up, given the age of the roads in town, we're gonna be looking at more of these pretty soon.
Don't disagree with that. Go ahead, Steve.
And I think the same could probably be said for, the water as well, because just my street, we had two mains pop, just on a small street here. So I think just getting back to the water, kind of a similar situation.
Anything else in the sinkholes right now? Let's go to the roof at the school. So remember, this one was tied to potential reimbursement from the state as part of the process. Unclear on whether it's going to be designed enough to actually be on the spring town meeting warrant, but it seemed like it was going to be pretty darn close based on at least what Keith and Becky had told us the night they were here. Is there any hesitation around this of doing it once the grant funding is ready? Joe?
I have none. This is about protecting one of the, I mean, we're talking about building an $81 million school. I don't feel like compromising the integrity of another school to have to do work later because we didn't keep it up. Although I would say I would love other money to pay for it, but if that's not forthcoming and it comes down to, taking a chance of just doing roof patches for a couple of years, I'm not sure I'm in love with that either.
Yeah, I mean, this number right now is gonna be eligible for state grant, which I think is somewhere between 36 and 40% coming back to us. All right. Now, where are people at on the turf field? I would forget about, Brian, you separated this out between CPA and general fund, but we obviously learned from recreation, they're not confident that CPA is even gonna entertain this. Would you say?
I'm sorry, I said very up to you.
So where are people at on Rec's presentation? Because we didn't really talk about it after their presentation. Go ahead, Joe.
I would like to see them sort of find a way to ensure that there's going to be a revenue source to pick up a good portion of this particular one. I know that they very much I look at this as the problem with the field plan falling through all those years ago. Now it benefits the people that want to put a new Neary where the AstroTurf would have been over there. But essentially the lights were diverted over to Choate. Now they want AstroTurf at Choate. And this was, the secondary option. Not in love with AstroTurf, not in love with that field for this. If we can ensure that there's going to be another revenue source to help pay for this, then I think I'd reconsider my decision. But if you told me it's going to all fall in general fund and we don't know, I'm not very enthusiastic right at this moment. Anyway.
Is there a target you had in your mind?
No, that's not a target, but I think we're all looking at so many expenses and paying for AstroTurf on this particular field isn't really high on my priority list versus some of the other things that certainly have, I won't say a more direct benefit because that's not fair. But certainly things that have a more immediate impact on the community.
Steve?
I would just say that the size presented probably doesn't make sense. As you get close to the, I don't think what I'm saying, I don't think the field needs to be the full size as it gets close to the drive path to the public safety department. I think if they came with, the actual, a soccer field plus some extra on the sides, maybe for bleachers or something, but to just do the entirety of that whole area, I think kind of it didn't work for me. I think they could probably come up with a more realistic approach to it and cut down the square foot, which would then cut down on the overall cost.
Yeah, I thought the Choate Field, that's a very interesting project. But again, I just have the overall budget question of, so how much does the town want to spend on bonded projects over the next 20, 30 years? I just don't know how we're supposed to put this in context with everything else that's being talked about being done over the next decade or two.
Brian, do you have a projected debt schedule of what the cost of these projects would show?
I do. I can't share it because I can't get onto the VPN.
Is
But,
it in the same file?
It might be under the tab of the all bonded. Yeah. No, that was a card bet. I mean,
How
I
about
can sure,
how about future not bonded debt?
yeah, that's. No, that wasn't the one. No, I can certainly, certainly share it with the committee if you want. Yeah, I don't know why the VPN's not allowing me to get on. But it's, I mean, Tony, it's a lot. It's obviously, the library's a big project too. So we got the library, Neary, this.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, these are all, arguably very compelling projects. And how much money does the town want to spend on these very compelling projects over the next 10, 20, 30 years? At some point it has to all be added up.
And I'd probably say, if Jason agrees, that if you don't do this choke project, and maybe we shouldn't do it, but if you don't do it now, it's probably gonna be pushed a little bit, especially with the Neary project. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, so that seems exactly right. But like, so this group, we're not like a policy group here, right? We're not, I mean, it's the select board's gonna have to, I guess, right? I'm not a politician. I don't understand how everything works here, but someone's gonna have to prioritize. Like, so do we, because if this one doesn't happen now, that's gonna be very hard to do in 3, 4 years.
Go ahead, Joe.
I think I'd like to add to that discussion that when we're looking at that but given the amount of work that if New Neary passes, the amount of work that's going to be done around that particular site, whether it might be more cost effective to put it at that site moving forward rather than disturb the current Choate site. If you're going to have to wipe away the old Neary when you put the new Neary up, would it be easier just to cover that with an AstroTurf field, and would it be cheaper because you're not sort of remaking? You're going to have to turn it up anyway. Would it be a little bit cheaper to just do it there?
So I can answer that question. It's a really good comment. And it's one that unfortunately we spent 6 to 9 months studying on the Near Building Committee. So originally we were planning to put the building in those fields. And then use the remaining, like where the current footprint is, use that for purposes of new fields. Unfortunately, what we found is that the soil that is where the current soccer, softball, baseball fields are is not structural fill. So what we would have had to do is completely remove everything from that entire site. So just think about truck after truck after truck going down Parkerville, in addition to construction traffic. It was going to add millions and millions just to the building project and create potential conservation and other buffer type issues, which is why we navigated back closer to where the existing building is, and actually are pretty much right on top of the existing foundation. So it certainly considered, but
So even to put an AstroTurf field where the current field over at Neary is, you'd have to tear it all up and dig it all out.
unfortunately,
You're right. That is very convenient.
yeah. And look, I think they had to do a little bit of that at Algonquin, right? When they just did that particular project, and it costed to move dirt, unfortunately, right? And I think the other reason that was cited, I think when Recreation was here, was the reason they were focused on Choate was obviously it's not at the site of a construction project. It's obviously permanently going to be recreational fields, like nothing else will ever go there because of the deed restrictions. And there's already lights. So you're not going to have to include lights in a budget or redo anything there. So I think that was at least compelling to me of why they were focused on that site. To Tony's point, I think what we need to do, and I imagine certain, or maybe all select board members, especially those that are kind of on some of these other committees, I think as part of the presentation and update that we provide on Tuesday night should show exactly that. Like, Brian, we just need to work together to get a slide that shows this is where we're at with everything we've done. I know we already have that, but then taking the file that your VPN's not letting you into and just layering that on, right? And just show the incremental, right? And show if we do this and not that, right? Just so that people can start to get their head around Like, because maybe someone really supports the library, but they don't support the school. Or they really support the recreation project in the school, but they don't support the library. Just kind of showing people what the impact of each is in isolation, so that they can all start to kind of understand whether it's important enough for them to vote for it. And kind of work through some of that. We all know the number is going to be staggering if we add all those up, which I think then is going to require us to continue to be creative with each of these projects of how you kind of accomplish most, not all, of the needs that are being articulated, and find a way to kind of combine assets as best as possible. Good, Joe.
Yeah, I think we all know that. I have no problem having anything go to town meeting for people to be able to vote on. This particular item might also go back to that field study plan that got picked apart because people didn't want to pay for it. This might be one of those things that you can put it on there because people might easily go after it and it'll just die quickly. So it won't be much of a discussion. Unless the softball crowd shows up to support that, because I think they're the most affected by this field.
I would say soccer, not softball. I realized there was a softball field there. Because there's two, but that goes to Steve's comment, right? Is Steve was questioning whether you need both fields or not.
Oh no, I'm just alluding to the fact there are a lot more soccer fields around than softball fields. So
That's fair.
that's all I meant. Not
Okay. Um. Okay. I'm not sure there's much more conversation we can have tonight on this, but we hadn't deliberated on anything, so that was important that we kind of understand where each of us are at, which I would summarize as follows, and you all please let me know if I'm miscategorizing. There's really not any one asset that's being proposed on here that is just an absolute no, if in a standalone case. We believe the department heads did their job to bring forward responsible projects. We're gravely concerned with the total amount that's being requested this year, and that's even without consideration of the known other large asks that are going to be coming before the town in, whether it be a special town meeting in May or future town meetings. So what we're going to do is provide buckets for them of what the decision points are, so that they can use their policy role to kind of help guide us. And then we will go back and vet as we see fit within kind of our charge, and bring a holistic view back for consideration.
Yeah, and Jason, I just mentioned that I talked to Kathy today, the chair of the select board. Tuesday night, she does not expect, I mean, I was very blunt about saying this is, again, a reminder that this is everything. It's not, what's gonna end up being the final ask. So I just, I want the committee to know that, yes, Tuesday night, we're gonna be talking about some probably ugly numbers, but it's also the department, as Jason mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, it's the departmental requests, with police with 6 new officers. It's the departmental request with fire with deputy chief and, several other departments with new staff. So I just want to make sure that the committee understands that it's a worst case scenario, but we're gonna find it as we go along.
Okay, so then I guess moving to our agenda topic in terms of the presentation, I'm happy to draft something. I guess what I need from the committee is whether you want to meet and approve it or not beforehand, and discuss it in any great detail. Again, my intention is to take kind of the buckets here and put the decision points, and also kind of show where the town is headed with everything that we have in the capital plan, based on what the departments have brought forward to date. With a huge cautionary tale, is just because it's in the capital plan doesn't mean that the town is going to vote, or even that we're going to support those in the future, because obviously things change. So what do you want to do about a meeting before a meeting or delegation of authority?
I personally, I think if you drafted something, just sent it to us. If anybody has a huge objection, just send it back, tell you what it is. And then if
We can't do that.
Oh, we can?
Just from an open meeting law perspective, I'm not comfortable doing that because it could lead to debate of,
Well, I wasn't talking between members, just individually with you. If they had a big enough gripe, then we could have, if they have a big enough issue,
yeah,
then have a meeting. But if there's no big issues, I don't think that there needs to be, you be held hostage to a
Yeah.
meeting.
I
That's
think
what I'm.
we're allowed to give you observations, Jason, and then you decide what you want to do.
yeah. So here's the other part is we're gonna have a posted public meeting on Tuesday for anyone that's planning to join. You have, even if I present something, right, like you should be there and present like hey, think about it this way, or potentially have a reaction to a comment from a select board member or advisory member. I'm planning to keep it brief, even more brief, just given Brian's statement than prior years, right? Just saying, here's where we're at, here's the summary of what we're looking at. Just like Brian, when you go and summarize the operating budget, I imagine you're going to say, here's baseline, here's all the new positions that have been requested, and here's all the other services that we're trying to add to the town, and here's the incremental impact.
And again, that's what Kathy wants. So just,
Yeah.
just so you know.
Okay, yeah. So let's do this. I will host a meeting for Monday night. If you have material comments, we will need to get on the phone and have a meeting. If you review the slide deck and are like, I'm good, and I'm just gonna weigh in verbally, we'll cancel the meeting. But I need to post the meeting because not gonna have enough time once, by the time I get it to you, you review it, I'll be out of luck from a posting perspective. Does that work to thread a needle here?
Thank you.
Okay. Now a favor, could you do 6:30 instead of 7 on Monday if we had to have a meeting?
Yes.
Just because I have Neary at 7 that night, so. And Brian does too. Okay. Other questions or comments for tonight? All right. Any public comment? You didn't have public comment, did you, Steve?
No, sorry.
Any other business? All right, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Joe,
Aye.
Steve,
Bye.
Tony,
Aye.
and I am I as well. Thank you.